Relationships are the only thing that matter in business and in life. Jerry Weintraub. On today's episode, I have the pleasure of bringing you an interview with some very special friends of ours. With Valentine's just a couple of days away, I thought I would bring you one more take on what it is like to be in business with your spouse. Welcome to the Stitched for Success podcast, where we are teaching business and life lessons that will help you launch, grow, or scale your creative business. I am Monica Allen, and I'm a wife, mom, daughter, entrepreneur, author, friend, lifelong learner, and host of this podcast. For over 8 years, I was stuck in corporate and dreamt of escaping. Creating a side hustle with just $700 and having taken the leap over 15 years ago, we have since grown multiple six-figure and seven-figure brands. Being an entrepreneur for over 18 years has afforded me many successes and a few failures. I want to share those with you so you can grow and be successful in your business. Abigail White and Jason Rhodes hold a special place in me and Ethan's heart. We have a lot in common in that we all attended the University of Georgia during the same years, but never met each other at the time. Ethan and Jason were even both art majors, but never ran into each other. With Ethan and Jason becoming forum mates in Entrepreneurs Organization here in Atlanta several years ago, it has afforded me the pleasure of getting to know both Jason and Abigail. They are the owners of Toolbox 9, a web development agency with a strong emphasis on user experience. With clients like the CDC Foundation, Lego, and Cartoon Network, they are making websites and apps easier to use, more simple, more engaging, and sometimes even more fun. Today, they are going to share some of their pointers on how they have learned to work together in their business. And next week, we will talk more with them about overcoming their business challenges in the early days and how 2020 impacted their business. You guys have been together for over 20 years. You've been in business together for over 14, 15 years. Tell me a little bit about that. What's the best thing about having your spouse as a partner, business partner?
Honestly, there's so many positive things. I think we've really grown together personally and professionally by having to work with each other day after day. But for me, which is kind of, 2020 has my number one kind of passion in life is to travel, which is obviously on pause during 2020. But one of the greatest things is that because we work together, even though we might have to work from another country, we've really been able to see the world by running a company and making sure that our schedules align and kind of allowing that flexibility so that we've been able to travel, to 7 continents, 53 countries, while still running our business together. So I've really enjoyed kind of the flexibility that we have had by running the company together.
Is the next question going to be what are the biggest challenges of working together?
Well, I want you to give me some bests first.
Yeah.
Jason,
so,
then we'll go to challenges.
Both Abigail and I, for better or for worse, we're just very independent people, and creating an environment where we can be rewarded or even pay the consequences of being independent. And I think we just had this natural instinct to want to paint the story of our lives, right? And even if it would have been have more stability to have us in different jobs, I think the unified effort of creating our own independence together is what part of that making our own energy. And of course, along this journey, you make mistakes, things you cannot make every single decision result in a positive outcome, right? But at least they are our decisions. And without the ability of running a company together, managing our time together, I feel like we would not have the ability to create that story for ourselves. So, like I said, for better, for worse, it is what brings us energy, right? And controlling our own destinies is an important part of our lives. And, we could have chosen a different way to manifest that, but this is what we chose. We chose to start a company that had the value system that we believe most in, that did the work that we believe most in, and move forward with the I would say, the ethics and values that we are most passionate about. And luckily, we've been able to see a reward for that, along with 15 years of hard work.
Yeah, I often joke with Ethan that I don't even know if we would still be together if we didn't work together, because we just have we have so much time together, and even though we may be working in different spaces, it's just nice to have that collaboration and, like you said, the common goal, the common mission together. So, Jason, what about challenges? What are the challenges
You
with
wanted to jump
working
into
with your
that one.
spouse?
Okay, well, let's just talk about let's talk about stress loads, right? Like, we share stress loads. And when you run a company, a win doesn't always feel like a win. So Abigail is a phenomenal salesperson and closer. And a major win for her increases the demand on our operations, right? So you immediately go from the reward of a major win to the task of delivery. And over the years, this kind of evens out, right? But when we spend all of our time together, and she is very aware of what my stressors are, right? There's no purity to the win, and I would say, if I could control the world, we would, or control the environment, we would learn the skills to be able to make sure those wins feel like wins. And it just requires a phenomenal amount of discipline to not share stress loads. And so we for sure have worked on this over the years, and we are better and better every year at it. But in the end of the day, there's a cold hard reality is there's ongoing stress loads of running a company, and how we help balance each other's stress loads is probably what keeps us together for so long and keeps the company stable. But it also presents an ongoing challenge of compartmentalization.
I get it. I totally get it. Abigail, what about you?
So I would definitely echo. I think for partners, working together hand in hand, we have, relatively few fights. We really have, since we got together, really have shared a very common kind of worldview, like we said, ethical framework, goals in life. Like, we were very aligned from the beginning. So it isn't like a tension in terms of us having different visions for the company. So definitely to echo what Jason said, and that's a constant battle, is like, all right, I'm brushing my teeth. I do not need you to already start talking about, the challenges of the workday. Like, let me get a coffee first. So there's constant, as Jason said, we're certainly getting better year after year, but there's always going to be those micro alignments where it's like, we need to reset the boundaries so that we can also have a little bit of space for our personal relationship that's outside of the work partnership. So it's always going to be a work in progress, but I certainly think we have gotten a lot better about managing that stress. And I think one of the things we did very early on, probably about 3 or 4 months after I joined Toolbox, we were both like, this is not working. we're going to call this a draw. And what we really did was carve out, and this is definitely a recommendation for anybody planning to, start a business with their spouse, is be very clear about your roles and responsibilities early on. And although we will certainly consult the other person, we know that, depending on, what the challenge is, it might be my decision because it falls under my domain. So I think once we really established those boundaries, things got so much smoother, because it's like, all right, well, you're going to ask me about that and I'm going to give you my opinion, but that's for you to make that decision. So it just kind of lowers that tension, and really, we always consult each other, but there is going to be that person that's responsible for that decision.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a common role, because Ethan and I went through the same thing early on, is kind of bumping into each other with roles. And once we were able to stay in our lane, but consult, that has helped so much, so much. So my next question is, how do you all turn it off?
Do you have a set of rules, or is it kind of fly by the seat of your pants?
Less rules, I would say, for me personally, and more like activities, right? There's just certain activities that take you out of the work mode and puts you in an environment where hopefully you can compartmentalize the work. I guess brushing their teeth is supposed to be one of them, but that's where most of my most brilliant ideas are conceived, is when Abigail's brushing her teeth. So unfortunately, that's just something we have to work through as a couple.
Yeah, I think it's more communication. Like we will, there have definitely been times where we're like, let's establish rules. But I will say, luckily, we are good communicators with each other. And there's also, we will kind of flag, like when we call it me time, or it's like, all right, or like, just it's time for work to be done. So I think it's more just, verbalizing like, all right, I need to decompress. I need to move on. It's now time for date night to start, or just to cook dinner and have some downtime. So really, it's just more of a really keeping those communication channels, open, and letting the other one know that it's all right. It's time to shut the door on work life.
And honestly, it's not always possible, right? Like, my brain gets spun up, and I think probably the most important thing is being honest. And I'm like, look, I am still spinning, right? I need an hour sometimes to like decompress. And I'm not always honest with myself, let alone Abigail. So like, she'll call me out on it. But every now and then I'll get home and I'm like, you know what? I don't think I'm ready to shift gears yet. It's going to take me a lot longer. And so I think that kind of goes back to the original statement about energy levels, being aware of each other's energy levels, and honest with ourselves about what type of mental headspace do we need to be healthy. And I don't know anyone who's mastered this. I think there's just some human instincts that you have to work around and find. But in the end of the day, it's the pros outweigh the cons. And I think a lot of people, and I know you and Ethan, from what I know, certainly agree that, the benefits of working together and sharing a livelihood together and have mutual passions and shared experiences as far outweighs the cons of that. And I think it's kind of funny when people are shocked that we work together for so long. And I'm not sure if funny is the right word, but I almost feel bad for people who tell me they're like, I could never do that. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe you would surprise yourself, number one, it takes time and work, but also like, I'm proud of it. I'm super proud that I can work with my wife and I can spend a phenomenal amount of time with her, and we can travel together and we can have dinner together and we can spend at this point, 99.9% of our time together. And, that's once again, it's part of our story. It's part of our journey. And I'm proud of that journey.
Yeah, I totally agree. 100% with that, Jason and Abigail. It is definitely a lot of pros and a blessing to have the time.
I want to thank Abigail and Jason for their time and for sharing their insight. If you are considering going into business with your spouse or significant other, I highly recommend it, as long as you're on the same page and you have the same goals. Just like in marriage, you must keep the lines of communication open and be willing to compromise. You may have to reset boundaries from time to time, and you may have to help each other manage your stress levels, but you can definitely do it if you know that this is something you want to do together. Just simply focus on what's important to you, your spouse, and your family. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to the podcast today. I am truly grateful for you. If you have any thoughts to add to the conversation, please feel free to comment on Instagram under one of the posts for this episode. My IG is @StitchedForSuccess. You can also reach me via email, which is stitchedforsuccess@gmail.com. Please share the podcast with a friend. Lastly, remember that we have a community for you on Facebook. Just come over and join us at the Stitch for Success Facebook group. I hope you have a great one and have a wonderful Valentine's Day weekend.